Okay, hello and welcome back again. I'm David Gray, Casa Palmera. Welcome to our family program. And the topic that we're doing today is going to be on support systems. And what support systems really is all about is this is what helps ensure that we really are going to do what's in the best interest of recovery. It is absolutely essential for us to do what's in the best interest of recovery. Oftentimes in treatment, people have a decision they're trying to make and they're wondering, what do I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? This job, that job. And I think the best advice I've ever been able to give is make sure you do what's in the best interest of your recovery. And there's another tag on to the end of that. Make sure you do what's in the best interest of your recovery, and please be extremely careful being the one by yourself deciding what that is. What a support system really is all about is it's going to help us learn how to live differently, how to make decisions differently. And normally in family program, in doing this group, I'm just writing the word change up here, and then what I'm doing is I'm asking everybody in the family program to give me a list of all the things that the person in treatment needs to work on change as they're now leaving treatment. In this case, for our virtual family program, I've went ahead and pre-made this list up here since you're not with me to put this list up on the board. And these are some of the typical things that end up on the board in doing this group. So, all of the things that need to change when somebody is now leaving treatment, right? Let's say they've been here 30, 60, 90 days, they've done a really good job. Now what begins happening day one? What needs to continue developing within the internal change process for that individual? We see many things such as behaviors will need to work on continued change, attitudes, and I'm going to use some I statements in here because I am in recovery. I'm somebody who went through treatment myself in order to be able to figure this out. Actually went through more than once because I kind of took the hard-headed, stubborn, barefoot cactus kicking approach, is kind of how I like to put it, where I was told stuff like this for a long, long time, and I didn't have a tendency of really listening to it, receiving it, and taking it in. All right, so to kind of continue on here with this list, so we need to work on change in behaviors, change in attitudes, also coping. So how am I coping with my feelings? How am I coping with thinking? And is that serving me well or is it not? And as we covered a lot in the group on emotional regulation, there was a lot of discussion on the role of feelings and thinking and what that has to do not only in our recovery, but what it also has to do in leading us here in the need of treatment in the first place. Additional things that need to change, and you often hear this in recovery language, you'll hear people say people, places, and things, right? So what about the people I associate with, the places I go, and the things I do need to work on ongoing change, all right? The next one is structure and routine. Is the structure and routine I've got established serving me well, or is it creating problems for me in my life? Also, relationships is a huge one where we need to work on ongoing change. And from a recovery standpoint, we identify this in three specific areas. We talk about the importance of relationships to and with spirituality, relationships to and with self, and relationships to and with others. I'm not going to be getting into it so much in this group, but when you look at the 12-step program, one of the reasons why that is so phenomenally successful is it really helps provide us with relational restoration to and with spirituality, to and with self, and to and with others. And in many ways, I think that's what healing and wellness is all about. The 12 steps is a way to do that. There's many ways to do that, but if somebody was to ask me to really define recovery and the meaning of it, I would say it's about establishing healthy relationships to and with spirituality, self, and others. And there's, again, a variety of different ways to do that, and that's really what we're trying to help achieve and accomplish for the individual while they're here with us in treatment at Casa Palmera. And two other things I want to put up here on the board that need to change. The first one is the past. So the past, we all have a relationship to it and with it. We always will. We cannot not. Our past is always going to be with us. Comments like, oh, get over it, let it go, move on. While those may be nice words to say, it's generally not quite that easy. So again, we all have a relationship to and with our past, and we always will. It's just, is that relationship one that's created perhaps for some impairment and disability? Or is it creating acceptance and understanding? Are we able to heal through it and move from it? And I love this saying, life's lessons, get them right or get them back. That's especially true in our relationship to and with the past. It's rich in opportunity to teach us, and there's many things we need to learn in order to really truly understand where we need to continue changing as well as we're going forward. And the final thing I like to put up here is the old DMP. And I use DMP as initials for something that really is important to change, and that stands for our decision-making process. So we all have a decision-making process. It's the process by which we use to come to making decisions. And when I'm doing this group, I'll ask people in the group, I said, so how has our decision-making process been working for us prior to coming into treatment? And generally, when people are honest with themselves, they end up realizing the answer is not so well. But in many cases, people have been doing the best they can. They've been doing the best they were capable of, and we want to help individuals really understand how to work on improving that decision-making process so it leads to much better results and much better outcomes. So, in moving on now to other aspects of what we're going to be talking about today, this support system, you could kind of think about it this way. I'm going to do this with 8 X's. Now, invariably, there may be somebody there who's saying that's 9 X's, and I'll say you're right. This one is the person who's leaving treatment, right? Virtually all of these other X's up here on the board are going to be those things that we view as support systems for recovery. And one of the things I often say to people when they're here in treatment, if you only remember one thing about me, I hope it's this. With me holding up my hands, holding up my fingers, talking about the importance of using diversified support systems. Because recovery is a plan of action lived. What are you going to do about it? And it's not what are you going to think about it, say about it, feel about it. The important thing to know is what are you going to do about it? That's the important answer to have. And recovery is strengthened as we do those things necessary in order for recovery to be strengthened. These are the things then that we need to do in order for recovery to be strengthened. I often ask a question to people. I'll say, there's only one thing stronger than the disease. What is it? The answer to that is recovery. And while there's a variety of different answers that people will give to that, including self, and self is actually not the only thing more powerful than the disease, although the disease would want us to think so, right? The one thing more powerful than the disease is our recovery. And in order to have a recovery that's strong, it is essential that we understand what we must do in order for that recovery to be strong, okay? So, as I go over this, I'm going to begin then filling out what these various things are that we really use as support systems. Now, there's something here that's really important also to understand, and I want to be able to define what these support systems need to be. These support systems need to rise to the level of a definition where they're considered to be experts and credible sources only. Now, this is going to be really essential, because if we end up putting things in here that are not experts and or credible sources, these things aren't going to have the ability to deliver the strength that we need for recovery. And there's something that I frequently say, I heard this along the way, and it's an important thing to be able to quote, that one of the number one reasons for failure in the recovery process is we end up putting our hope, trust, faith, and confidence in things that don't have the ability to deliver what we want or need. And when we end up doing that, we don't get our needs met, we don't get what we want, and we end up really significantly disappointed. Now that also kind of connects in with another really good saying, expectations are premeditated resentments. So what we need to do is we have to make sure that when we truly are putting our hope, trust, faith, and confidence in something, in this case, experts and credible sources to be this diversified system of support for recovery, we want to make sure that those things truly have the ability to deliver what we want and need from them. And the primary role of this stuff here is to really be able to teach, promote, and advocate change to the individual in all of these areas that were previously reviewed, all right? So what are these things? Well, as we start to kind of break out this list, and this is more than just 12 steps, so I'm going to expand on this as kind of the concept of a support system of which 12-step is part of it, but it's not the only part of it. So we're going to have a variety of different things here. So right off the bat, let me put here fellowship with LM. And what fellowship with LM stands for, that's fellowship with like-minded. So if I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm starting to connect with members of Alcoholics Anonymous, starting to develop fellowship with them in a meaningful way, kind of as they talk about the meeting before the meeting after the meeting, and really getting to know people in a genuine way. One of the next things that I like to put up here, and this may initially seem a little like, well, why are you putting that up there as a support system? But bear with me for a moment, and I think you'll see the significance of it. I put journaling. And the reason why I put journaling up here is I like to ask the question, what's one of the worst things to do with our feelings and our emotions? Thoughts on that? The answer that often comes up is stuff them, bottle them, avoid them. And the process of journaling is the opposite of that, where what we're working on doing is we're really working on expressing these thoughts and these feelings and these emotions and being able to get them out in an effective way so that you have the ability to see what's going on here and what's going on here, and you have the ability to start learning how to identify it and express it and be able to get it out. And not only that, but through the process of journaling, here's a really good saying, again, for recovery. We can sum up all of recovery by saying we need to learn to survive our feelings. The best way for us to learn to survive our feelings is we have to start learning to both identify and express them. One of the most powerful ways of doing that is through journaling. And also, just keep in mind, not all journaling is healthy and effective. You know, what's fed grows stronger. There are some people in their process of journaling that can really feed kind of darkness and anger and bitterness and resentment, and it just causes us to really be trapped and kind of stuck in those things. Or journaling can really help develop understanding, insight, acceptance, and awareness, and the capacity to move on and to move through these difficult experiences. The next thing we would have here on our support system wheel, therapist. Of course, one of my personal favorites, and I'm a little bit prejudiced here when I say this, but I also now want to give my therapist disclaimer, right? So, we can say it's important to see a qualified therapist, and not all therapists are qualified or effective. So you want to be able to find a qualified, effective therapist, and you can see how a good therapist is going to help you with many of these areas here as we work on that process of transformative change in many of these areas, right? But here's my therapist disclaimer. So I have a question for you. Assuming you sleep 8 hours a night, 7 days of the week, how many hours during that week are you awake? Anybody want to use their calculator to figure that one out? I've actually had people in family program groups shout out the answer to that in about 5 seconds. It amazes me somebody could be that fast with math. I wasn't. And the only way I survived it was with extensive tutoring. Assuming you sleep 8 hours a night, you are awake during the week, 7 days of that week, 112 waking hours. Right? So my question is this: how many hours a week are you seeing that therapist? Right? Generally it's 1. So the question here, what are you doing during those other 111 waking hours during the week in order to really work on effectively getting your needs met? And you really start to see here the importance of that really well-diversified system of support, and it's not just any one thing that we're focused on having. All right? The next thing along this support system would be spirituality. And from a recovery standpoint, we really talk about a spirituality that is inclusive versus exclusive. And by inclusive, I mean it includes everyone and it encourages each person to develop a belief system that can work for them, something that can really help them and give them guidance and direction in life. And we find people that are able to make progress with this generally have a tendency of doing better in the overall experience of recovery. The next thing along the lines here goes by the initials of IOP or CC for continuing care. So this would be after primary treatment is over. We want to see people continue on at an outpatient level of care. That's typically 3 hours a day, 3 times a week. IOP generally lasts anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. CC stands for Weekly Continuing Care. At Casa Palmera, we provide weekly continuing care at no charge for 1 year post-discharge from successful completion of any level of treatment that we have at the facility, meaning all the way through inpatient residential, RTC, PHP, some initials admissions can help you to understand, and or IOP. The next thing that we would have here on the support system is, for many people, it would be maybe sober living home. This would be the environment that somebody is discharging to. So either the sober living home or that the environment somebody is discharging to, we want to see that it's safe, stable, and supportive, free from all forms of abuse, free from all mind and mood altering substances and substances being used on that property from all people that live there, so that we have a real supportive environment for the individual who's discharging from treatment. Again, what is often helpful for some people is to go to a sober living home. We'd recommend men to men's sober living, women to women's sober living, to really be in a supportive environment with people early in recovery that are all there through shared experience to help each other to be successful in their early process of recovery. The next thing on the list here is the importance of having what we could view as a teacher. And I like to refer to this as several different names: a teacher, a mentor, a guide, and here's my personal favorite, the way showers. This is what one of my professors used, and she would say, what do we need to find when we've lost our way? We need to find the way showers, and those are going to be the ones that are going to help guide us back, right? These are also people here who, this is not a fee-based service. You're not dealing with a professional like you would be with a therapist. These are people who, through their own life experience, are here giving back to you, who have figured out how to do this in their own lives, in their own journey, and they're here to assist you in the early stages along your journey as well, all right? Now, the final thing for this, and by the way, I will say I used to do this with 12 X's on the board. Now there's only 8, so this is the lighter version of this lecture. The bottom one down here on the corner, this is going to be things like meetings. So this would be all form of self-help, whatever the person is utilizing. Of course, 12-step is very prevalent, and there's many different meetings, and it's supported throughout every county and locale in the United States and even worldwide. There's other forms of meetings and self-help groups as well, such as Smart Recovery, that people can also participate in. And the other thing that I like to put underneath that, so this would be meetings and or groups. So the significance here is that groups are generally professionally run and led. This would be done by a facilitator. This is the type of thing where maybe you pay per session that you're going to. Groups often are theme-based or topic-based. They may run 12 to 16 weeks at a time. And again, these are self-help in nature. Generally, there's no fees or dues associated with participation in these groups. Now, you may have noticed I have up here on the board very important. So what this list is for is generally, again, when we're doing this group and you're all here with me in person versus this virtual reality that we're currently in, I'm asking you guys the questions, what are these things that we put up here? And what I'll do is I'll say, you're going to give me some things that I'll agree with you are very important, but they're not going to end up coming up here. And generally the reason for that is because we don't identify them as experts and or credible sources. And I'm not saying these things aren't very important. I'm just saying, again, we want to understand the difference between what goes down here and what truly goes up here. Because you remember a little bit earlier I said, we really err when we put our hope, trust, faith, and confidence in things that don't have the ability to deliver what we want or need. This is a perfect example of doing that. That if we're thinking this stuff is just as powerful and important as this stuff in promoting and advocating change in all of these areas here, we're going to be really disappointed, and it's going to be misleading for us, all right? So some of the common things that end up coming down here would be things like somebody says the gym. I'll say, okay, it's important, but we're not going to put it up here, right? So gym, exercise, right? Now, there may be times where somebody else would also then say nutritionist, healthy eating. I'll say, fantastic, it's very important, but we're also going to put it down here. right? And here's kind of the disclaimer on some of this as to why this goes down here. I've worked with plenty of people over the years who don't exercise, they don't have a gym membership. They'd really benefit from one if they did, but they're doing extremely well in recovery for the first year because they're really solid in these things here. Likewise, other people that eat too much junk food, I won't mention any particular brands, but you know, they could be eating healthier. You know, they're not really eating really healthy. They don't have a nutritionist that they see. Sure, it would be helpful if they did. But again, I see many of those same people doing extremely well the first 12 months in their recovery because, again, they're very solid in these areas here, right? Plus, if I think the gym is just as important as therapist, I'm going to kind of like, what should I do today? I just don't feel like going to see my therapist. I'm just going to cancel, and I think I'll go to the gym. And then what ends up happening is we're now doing something that just didn't have the ability to be as effective at helping us in these areas here, all right? Now, bear with me for just a second because I'm going to put something up here where I'm really being master of the obvious. And I think you'll see the point here where I'm going with this. There is that which we need to do first, right? And like I said, bear with me here because I'm going to seem like I'm just being master of the obvious. There's that which we need to do first before we can then receive that thing which we want and hope for second. All right? So this is the results and outcomes we really want and need in life. This is what we need to do to get it, right? And repeatedly, I've had people over the years express a lot of frustration with me for the lack of this in their lives. But you know what they're not doing? You probably guessed it. They're not doing what they need to be doing first in order to reasonably expect that these results and these outcomes can then be generated. So here's what I mean then by this. What we need to do first is represented by these pink lines going out. And what these pink lines going out represent is the action of connecting. It's the action of doing it. So remember when I said before, recovery is a plan of action lived. Here's a perfect example of that. And kind of one of the ways I like to put it is the swoosh. Looks a little bit different each time, but it gets put up there when I do this group to remember that these pink lines represent the importance to just do it, right? So, and after we then do that, here's what's able to happen for us. The energy represented by the green arrows now begins to happen. And again, when doing this group, I'll often ask the group, what does this represent? And again, you've probably guessed it, this is now the results and the outcomes. This is us getting the help and the support we need with transformational change in all of these areas here because we're doing what's necessary to connect to the support systems that can really best teach, support, and advocate that change process. There's one final thing here that I want to go over. And I've often had to give a disclaimer over the years on what this is not. So I'm going to try to avoid the disclaimer, and we'll just see how this one goes, all right? So I draw this up here on the board, and then I'll ask, what is it? And you may have guessed, it's a funnel. If you guessed something else that was different than that, that's not what it is. It really is a funnel. Remember before when I said decision-making process? How about whatever it is that we're trying to decide, put that into this support system and filter it through all these various systems of support, because I can assure you, whatever comes out down here is the answer to what is truly in the best interest of recovery is probably going to be a lot different than what was being put up here when it was just you by yourself trying to figure it out. So this is kind of the concept of a support system. There's very little space left on the whiteboard. I think I'll have to finish now because I don't have much more room to write. I hope you found this to be helpful and meaningful. Diversified support systems are essential to success in recovery. And remember the importance again that recovery is a plan of action lived. What are you going to do about it?